let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome and thank everyone for joining us for our webinar today. The topic's insider threats, ransomware, and how to protect your company against them. So I'm Trista Perot, I'm Director of Marketing for Global Data Vault, and we are so happy to have you and our partner BitLift to have you all join us today. So before we launch, just a couple of housekeeping items for you. If you should need to leave the webinar early, no worries. It will be available for replay after the event, and you should automatically get the link for that. We're going to keep the chat box open for you during the presentation so you can ask questions. Hopefully, we've anticipated most of the things that might bubble up during that, but if not, we'll circle back at the end and try to answer as many of those as we can. So let's go ahead and get on with it. Anybody knows, if you do a quick Google search, you're going to find out that in 2019, it was actually estimated that new organizations were infected with ransomware every 14 seconds. And also that ransomware is, the amounts that they're asking for is increased by like 90%, which is only part of the rising costs that a company face when it cripples their organization. And it also leads to about 10 days of downtime. So what can you do? We're going to talk about that today, but first, let me introduce our team. So in chat and invisible, but available to answer quick questions, we have Leslie Ferris. She is with Global Data Vault, and she is our East Coast Territory Manager. We have Nicholas Pedette, and he is the Chief Marketing Officer for BitLift. And we also have Ali Staltler, and she is our beloved Veeam Territory Manager. So all three of those wonderful people will be in there to help answer questions if you have anything specific for their company, or just throw chat questions in there as well. As for our speakers today, I'm going to kick it off by introducing the first one, who is Will Bassich, and he's our GDV CEO. And Will co-founded Global Data Vault roughly 20 years ago.
A long time ago.
In tech years is an absolute eternity, but what you should take away from that is he's seen a lot when it comes to backup and recovery. And excuse me, he firmly believes that his calling is to solve problems for customers, team members, and vendors, while simultaneously providing the best value and most secure disaster recovery solutions available. So I'm going to kick it off to you, Will.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for coming today. I'm going to introduce the guys that will be delivering most of the content today, starting with Jason Miller. Jason's a guy that I've known for a pretty good long time, since well before he founded BitLift. And I think if you get to know him and work with his company, you'll realize that he was born for this role. He is fantastic at what he does. He's built a great company, and BitLift works for us, provides protection for us, and they just do a super fantastic job. And we're really glad to have you with us today, Jason. And then Brian Brignac, who is our sales and marketing leader in our organization at Global Data Vault. Brian has been with Global Data Vault since almost the very beginning, and he came over from the technical side as an operations guy. So he understands the needs that our customers bring a great deal better than most of the people you will talk to on the sales side of the space. But he also comes to it from the perspective of really caring about doing the right thing for the customer. I think if you get to know Brian, you'll feel that pretty easily and pretty quickly as you work with him. So the things that we're going to cover today are on this slide, and I won't bother reading these to you, but the overarching message of all of this is that backup and security are intertwined. We've been making that point for several years now. We've tightened our partnership with BitLift and deliver BitLift to every customer who takes a backup repository from us as a form of additional layer of protection on that backup repository. And I think finally the rest of the market, I've been finally hearing that same comment that backup and security are intertwined from other players and some of the big thought leaders in the space. It's good to hear that. It's something that we recognized a while out, but it's an important thing, I think, for us all to keep thinking about as we go through this. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who is going to cover front end of security, that first layer of protection, and then Brian will walk through the back end of security and how we can facilitate the recoveries and through the protection of the data that we have through those disaster recovery instances that we provide for our customers on a routine basis. So thank you again, and again, please pop some questions into the chat box as they come up. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Will, and thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. We're happy to have you and look forward to providing the education and the information that's going to be talked about here today. And thank you, Global Data Vault team, for putting this together. Please do interact with us over in the chat. We're all watching it and look forward to providing information as you guys have questions. So we're going to talk about what we see as a reality, and we're going to talk about some real life cases today. But one of the focus areas that we decided to share was the front end of security and kind of the back end of security. We really see it as two slices of the pie, if you will. The front end of security is what I'm going to talk about here, and it's not limited to the back end security, and we're even going to get into some of the insider threat. But on the front end of security, what we try and help clients focus on is understanding the drive-by port scans, the drive-by type of scenarios that happen. And we can all think about this in a physical realm. So from a physical realm, if I was to drive by your house and I was a criminal hacker, and maybe I drove by real slow, looked at your house, kind of sized it up, understood the number of doors and windows and kind of entrances and exits to your home, that would be kind of like the analogy around the drive-by scanning. This is happening to almost everybody's environment today. If you're connected to the internet, I can promise you at one point in time or another, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, there are scannings that are happening. And it's the bots that are collecting information, the total number of IP addresses that you might publicly hold, what IPs and the ports that are open, and maybe even locations, right? Where are those IPs and locations, and then to start to do some initial reconnaissance around who owns those IPs. Is it your name in your corporate entity, or is it a data center? Things like that. And then what happens is a little bit deeper of a scan. This is where further investigation happens. This is, again, on the physical realm. The deeper scan might be me actually pulling into your driveway, walking up to your porch, and looking at taking a peek inside of the window or inside of the door to kind of figure out a little bit more. Looking for cameras. Do you have Ring as a doorbell on your front door, or are you the type of person that has, no cameras, no Ring, no Internet of Things on the outside? Those types of things, right? So this is the deeper scan. And I can do this really well, right? Amazon's delivering to a lot of people's homes, or you're having deliveries done. I might be doing a fake delivery. I might drop off a cardboard box at the porch of your door, and make it look like I'm real, right? And so on the deeper scan, from a digital perspective, this is where I talk to the ports on your IPs, and I actually try and get them to do something and give me a response to figure out, will those ports in any of the applications on the other side of those ports actually respond to me? And then from there is, once I've gotten those two types of pieces of information that I need, I can then actually do my first attempt. And I can actually look at testing the access that I have. So this, again, on the physical realm, I've gone up to your porch, I've kind of looked at it. Maybe the next day, the third day or the fourth day, I decide to actually go up and access the thing that I felt was vulnerable. And this is where we actually see on a digital perspective, an account was accessed. They've got access to your environment, but they didn't do anything. They maybe just want to actually access it and see how far they could get in, or how the systems are set up, or if they've been patched lately. They may wait a week or two, and then actually perform the attack. Now, the attack we've seen lots of attacks. The attack we've seen most recently is a lot of plant the first service or the first piece of malware, and then actually stage the attack a couple days later. And that is because we are starting to see theft of data on the front end, and theft of maybe even some more credentials, because they are planning methodically out that either you'll figure out, hey, this account was accessed by Nigeria or some other place in the United States from this IP that we don't typically get into. And so they're thinking, hey, if we are found as this activity is found, we want to have second way, third way, fourth way, fifth way into the environment if we lose access to the first method. And so this is where we start to see reconnaissance inside the environment, and it becomes an insider attack, and an insider threat. But we also start to see where the data is leaving the building in those first few days in that first layer of attack. And we'll tell you why here in a few minutes. So as we move forward, some of these attack avenues, or we actually call them attack vectors, these channels, oftentimes are coming through email. Over 90% of first phase actually comes through email. They get you to respond to the email, even just a simple reply. And this is through whatever your vendor is, Office 365, Google, Gmail, we see it. The direct attacks, where they already have your name, your username, and your password. So what we often tell people is do not use your username as your email address. Think about all the people that you interact with that know your email address. And then if I also put a couple more pieces of information together, I know that you interact with salesforce.com, or you interact with Office 365, or you might interact with QuickBooks Online. Well, all of a sudden now I know your username. So now I only just need to crack your password, or I just need to go find your password that you've put somewhere. And so what we want to try and do is have different layers that mix it up for people. This direct attack really gets into payroll systems, the HR employee data, contractor data that you might actually hold on other entities that you do business with, right? If you think about that, that's where we start to see company A gets an attack happens on them. They might not know that they're breached, and then company B and C are also victims because they utilize the information that they found at company A to then attack company B and C. You see this almost from our perspective, we see this on a month-to-month basis. And then file data, whether you're utilizing an in-house server or some sort of Google Drive or OneDrive for Business, these cloud services, you're now having to protect them just as if they were inside of your four walls. And then dormant breaches are rising at an astronomical rate, meaning that something was planted in your environment, a service account, maybe they got access to an account and they realized over weeks and months, nothing changed. And so they're sitting there gathering data, watching what's happening, understanding the behavior in your environment. And for the day that they plan to say, hey, today is D-Day, today is the day that we're going to unleash the attack. All of this leads to facts that we wanted to point out to you, that there's intelligence gathering happening about who works where. Are you in the accounting department? Are you in HR? Are you in IT? Are you in the C-levels? How you talk to people. Are you friendly with them? Are you straight to the point? what type of slang do you use in your emails, back and forth. All of these things are important, and even who you're friends with. Are you grabbing a drink with them after hours, or picking up their kids because they're running late? Those types of things all mean something, and they're little cues that get picked up on. So as we continue to move forward here through these attack vectors, what we wanted to share with you is something I kind of already mentioned a little bit, but this is a story that we can talk about. Is near and dear to our home. BitLift is located in East Lansing, Michigan. Michigan State University is not a client of ours, but what we wanted to point out here is that they were actually attacked by a few of their departments. Most recently, you can go out and Google search this and find the articles, but Networker ransomware actually did encrypt PII usernames, SSNs. And so what the university said was, hey, we're not going to pay. And the point that we're trying to educate people on here is that if you take the position, which I would encourage you not to pay criminals anyhow, it gets what they want. They want you to pay. But what we would say here is data is typically stolen from your environment before they encrypt it with ransomware. And the whole reason is because they want you to pay. So then they'll threaten you, hey, if you don't get the unencryption key and pay us, we're going to leak your data. And so that's why we are so focused on the front end aspects of security. And then at the same time, the IT response was within hours around this, but then they had days afterwards of media and kind of messaging and cleanup. And they had to explain why they weren't taking care of these departments like they were in the like the rest of the university. So as we move on here, a couple of things that we want to emphasize is that protection against the threats. So we just 2 weeks ago had a conversation with, hey, now that COVID-19 is technically still here and upon us, but everybody went home to work. And some people are saying, what do we do in order to go back to work? Is you need to have a conversation with the appropriate decision makers, get buy-in from the team, identify the most sensitive business information is critical. I ask this a lot of times of our clients is where is the most sensitive information inside of the business that you want to protect, that you have to protect in order to keep the business running and operational. And oftentimes they'd say, well, it's spread over, a whole bunch of SaaS products. Okay, well, we need to start to identify those. Are backups happening on those? Is disaster recovery? When was the last time we tested our disaster recovery? All of those types of things. Another key point here is don't use the same email, username, and password for multiple SaaSes or multiple applications. We see this a lot. Enabling two-factor authentication, being able to monitor credentials, endpoint security, it goes on. Backup and recovery is a big thing, and I'm going to leave this for Brian to really touch on because he shines there. But logging the activity is critical. We need to know, has this username or this account done this type of behavior or activity within the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? And if it hasn't, well, then you know what? Let's neutralize the account. The activity could be too risky or too suspicious that we don't want to even take the chance. So that investigation is super important. Which brings me to this. So we see a lot of kind of like buzz in the marketplace. At the foundational of the core of what BitLift does is log monitoring. It's super important to collect logs from all aspects of the environment, not only the environment on-prem, but your SaaS products as well. Almost all of them today that are mature SaaS offerings allow some sort of log output. And the reasons are for that is that at the end of the day, it's still your business and your entity that is on the hook for its security. Even though that you might be utilizing a SaaS product, it's still going to be your logo and your name that shows up when the data was leaked. And you want to try and prevent that. You also want to try and make sure that the credentials are not stolen. The credentials that are being utilized inside of those products and inside the office or exterior are being utilized legitimately. If you're somebody that logs in from Dallas, Texas every day, you want to make sure that your credentials are only be logging in from Dallas, Texas. If you're logged in at Dallas, Texas, and you're being attempted to log in from New York, New York, well, then we got a problem, right? That's called you can't fly there quick enough. And so it's called impossible travel. And so what we would want to do is just flag that, right? But we also want to determine what's normal in the environment. And so a SIM gives you this type of capability. It's one of the foundational aspects of BitLift, but we monitor and baseline all activity. Even if it's not a human being, a service account still has credentials. And you might even have service accounts in your environment that have higher escalated privileges, and you need to pay special attention to those. So visibility is important because it helps with that pre-attack information. And this helps us really understand the front end of security. So I've talked about the drive-bys, I've talked about all of that reconnaissance of information. And this is really the BitLift Air platform. This is what Global Data Vault and a lot of other clients of ours utilize is our platform that is a culmination. It is a complete offering of SIM, log ingestion, alerts, user behavior analytics, our SOC team, where our security engineers are constantly in communication with our clients, analyzing and looking at data, making sure that they're protected, their data is protected, and that behavior or activity is not happening on their environment that they do not want. And then from our SOC team, we have a weekly call with every one of our clients. And that in that weekly call, we understand the baseline of the environment with them. We talk through any alarms and alerts that might have gone off in the last week or two or 3 or 4 inside of their environment. And then we ask them to approve any automations that we have built for their environment while we're on that call. And this is important because a lot of our clients have come to us and said, hey, we noticed activity in our environment and it took us all day, or it took us 2 or 3 days to actually clean up and remediate the problems. And that's important. So what we've done is we've actually built a SOAR platform that is with the client in mind, addressing the needs. And oftentimes today we're neutralizing threats. And I use that word neutralizing is important because we're throwing the jail cell down around the bad actor right in the footsteps where they're at, oftentimes in 2.1 seconds. So from alarm to identification to neutralization of a bad actor is about 2.1 seconds with our platform in place. And then the fourth component of our platform is CTI. And CTI is contextualized threat intelligence, and it's a data warehouse. This is real-time streaming data in from all of the SIMs that we're connected to. That data, that metadata comes back to us. We normalize it, categorize it, and then we push that information back out into a normalized threat feed. That threat feed goes to email, that threat feed goes back to the SIMs, and we tell it, hey, this activity was bad. And so what we want to do is protect the environment and protect the SaaSes from that activity happening again. And that is pretty popular, and it's an advantageous move that a lot of our clients did not even have before. What's oftentimes missing is the knowledge of the community, the shared knowledge, the crowdsourced knowledge, and we provide that with CTI, that if something happens to client A, we automatically within seconds share that centralized threat intelligence information with client B, C, and D right on down the line. And so they're equipped and knowledgeable, and they're proactively protected from attack that didn't even happen to their environment. It happened to somebody else, but they get that shared knowledge. And that's what Global Data Vault is being protected with here. So moving forward, what we want to try and do is now move this over to Brian, and Brian is going to talk about the insider threats that we have seen together as BitLift and Global Data Vault, and what Global Data Vault has done to help protect there. Brian.
Thank you, Jason. We all appreciate the general overview of the front end and what you've seen and how you help remediate the issues that you see. Everybody has turned on the news, and we've all seen the media reports of all the municipalities and the colleges, the hospitals, and so forth. But Global Data Vault, being that we are in the backup and DR and data protection business, we have firsthand knowledge of the threats that are out there. MSPs, manufacturing, construction, consumer products, it doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone. And fortunately, when we see the threats, especially of the more sophisticated threats of the insider hack, we've been able to recover all of our customers without a hitch. So that is part of partnering with a company like BitLift. On the next slide, basically, it's how is this possible and what can be done about it? It's pretty simple. How it's possible: phishing emails, firewall configs. The list just goes on and on and on. So there are a lot of ways that companies are vulnerable, and technology changes. It's hard to keep up with this kind of stuff. But what is most important is, when this happens, how can we recover? And that's where Global Data Vault and BitLift, and the joint partnership that can help that. Again, there are a number of ways that this can happen. Most of the time, they've gained access to the local environment, and things begin to deteriorate from there. Just to go to the next one. With that being said, the data can also be accidentally deleted. We see it on a daily basis. This happens all the time. So ransomware, as a standard approach, it all begins with the backups. If you don't have a reliable, robust backup solution, you're vulnerable. Global Data Vault has come up with some proprietary technology to help alleviate these kind of things. And for the webinar members, the graphs may be kind of small, but let me just give you a general overview of the anatomy of how things take place. They basically just gain access to the Veeam console. They know if you have a cloud repository, that's the first recovery method that somebody is going to fall back on to be able to recover their data. Once they delete that from internally, then they begin the encryption process. And then, of course, here comes the demands. The invisible copy is what our technology and tools that we've developed over the years, and more so with the partnership of BitLift. We're able to take an invisible copy in a repository that keeps essentially 14 days of backups. It's 7 days and a weekly at all times. So in the event that the customer gets hacked, they delete the main repository, we're going to revert back to the invisible repository. This screen here, and again, I'm just going to summarize it because I know everybody on this webinar is not going to fully grasp everything. But essentially, you got your local backup, you got your cloud repository. We create a second repository, which we call an invisible repository, which in turn is our flavor of enhanced data protection. The little file graph at the bottom is showing the data restore points that we're going to keep, which equates to about 14 days worth. So in the event that you get hacked, and the first thing they do is delete that, we're just going to have that customer refer back to the invisible repository. That's where we're going to recover from. Next one, Tristan. This is a serious threat. Threats are being more sophisticated. So by partner, again, I want to stress this relationship between BitLift and Global Data Vault. It has benefited us drastically And again, it's not just a monitoring tool. It's a remediation product as well. It's kind of like the commercial that the bank's getting robbed and the security guard says, I'm not going to stop it. I'm just going to let you know that the bank is getting robbed. That does no one no good. So by the partnership with BitLift, has been a great partnership. And I believe now Will is going to close us out here. And if anybody has any questions, again, you can still pop them in the chat area, but we will have a Q&A after this is over with.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to one thing there before you take it back over, which was, so one of the partnership aspects that we've built between BitLift and Global Data Vault was Global Data Vault brings a subject matter expertise around everything Veeam. And so Global Data Vault started sharing with BitLift where, hey, we feel like we've got maybe some gaps or some vulnerabilities here, here, and here. And so we started ingesting the logs from the Veeam console and the Veeam product as a whole. And then we, as BitLift, started sharing with Global Data Vault where we feel like we can give some suggestions and make recommendations. And as we analyze those logs, we can go back to Global Data Vault and say, within seconds, an automated alarm and email text message can go off and say, hey, we noticed that the Veeam admin username was used to log in, and then it performed a local deletion of the backups and it performed a cloud deletion of the backups. And the alert can say, hey, was this intended, right? And we can even there's automations that can be activated that said, when that activity is seen, we can go neutralize the account quickly. Because it's not too often that you should see the admin log in and delete the local backups and go delete the cloud backups. If so, please let us know. We'd like to hear feedback around that, but we believe that that is behavior that you definitely should not be seeing on a typical day-to-day basis. And so us together, we're looking at those security gaps and making sure that the gaps are narrowed or filled in, and the security posture is super solid. So with that, turn it over to Will.
Yeah, Will, one thing real quick. I see Philip asked a question. That's a great question because nobody can grasp, the technology behind it. It is off network. The Veeam user, the admin, no one at that facility except the Veeam cloud provider has access to that cloud repository.
Yeah, and adding to that, or maybe reiterating what the point that's been made is, over the last couple of years, we've seen this evolve. 3-4 years ago, we'd have a customer call us and say, "Oh my God, my data's been encrypted." And we'd have a cloud repository with their data. We would just work out a recovery strategy to restore the data, or recover the data, run from our cloud, what have you. And that was our resolution. Starting about a year and a half ago, as the ransomers realized that if there was a good remote backup, they were not going to get paid, they started to figure out that they needed to get to the backup console. So they wait until they got administrative credentials, get on the backup console, and before deploying the encryption, they'd go and delete the remote repositories. And we now see this as commonly occurring. Now, you can't lock down you don't want to turn off access for the Veeam console to have access to the remote repository. That wouldn't be a particularly logical feature. And if you could shut it down, the place you would shut it down is in Veeam, right? And so if you had access, you'd still be able to open it back up and then delete the remote repositories. So our answer was something like that, that immutable copy concept, the immutable repository that Drew asked about. And the way we accomplish it is with a separate set of pointers to the files. We make a copy of those file pointers so that we're not burning a whole lot of extra space, but it stays fresh. Every time there's a new incremental that's sent to us, in the form, not to get too technical, but those VIBs that come, the daily incremental files that come to us. Every time there's a new daily incremental, there's 2 sets of file pointers to that incremental, and if the Veeam console deletes everything in the remote repository, we still have all those files and we protect them. That's what we've developed. It's our secret sauce around Veeam. We have not seen anybody else. We just got done with Veeam on last week, and I attended a lot of the breakout sessions and keynotes. We haven't seen anybody that has anything close to this in terms of a solution that's both practical, easy to implement, doesn't require a lot of extra overhead and storage, and stays current all the time. So we think that this is just truly essential to any sort of backup strategy, and we're just kind of grateful and peaceful now that we are delivering this for all of our new customers. I want to thank Brian and Jason for their presentations today. Very educational and helpful. And really thank everyone who came by. I think I don't know if we have some questions from the chat that have accumulated. Do you have any other questions, Trista?
Well, we always get some questions about pricing, and I think a common question is, how much extra is BitLift on top of everything else? Like, is it super expensive for customers? Like, talk around that point.
Jason, you want to hit that?
Yeah. So we have worked out a really nice strategy with Global Data Vault that allows for not only the server that's on premise, but also if the client wants to extend the same security controls and measures that we're putting on that repository throughout the rest of their environment, we provide a utility model of cybersecurity. So it is a pay for what you consume and use, and not a penny more. This way here, you're not having to buy, licensing and all of this for what you could have maybe in 3 months or 6 months. It's a lot like the Global Data Vault model, where we take a look at what are you using today, what are you needing to back up, and what are you needing to protect, and that's what we put the pricing around. So it's a very, I'm not speaking to your model, but it's a utility model. It's flexible.
We are including BitLift whenever we provide a backup repository, or if a customer has their own backup repository, we'll include BitLift on that repository as well. And that's providing all that first layer of security and protection for the customer's backup repository. Our general view about pricing is that it should be easily understood, simple, clear. It shouldn't be something that varies from month to month, where your invoice is going to be a big surprise. We work with our customers to quote each opportunity separately to make sure that we have something that's cost effective, that works for our customers, and within a range we can deliver effective solutions for most people that talk to us. We want to keep it simple and clear and easy to understand. Not a lot of a la carte and add-on and surprise type stuff.
Yeah, and Will, let me elaborate a little bit more. So we base our pricing off of protected storage, not what you're consuming on the cloud side. So we bring the customer, we want to know, give us the raw storage used on-prem. We have a standard retention policy that, as long as you're fine with that standard retention policy, we give you 10 restore points and a monthly offsite. But you're not paying for the total consumed offsite, you're paying for what you consume locally. And as Will mentioned, BitLift in our enhanced data protection is included with every new customer. And like you said, no a la carte pricing. It's normally a fixed cost, and we try to keep things very simple. But to pre-qualifying in the sales process, very simple. You get a price out in about 15 minutes.
Yeah, but we also support longer retention policies all the way up to unlimited retention policies, as well as custom retention policies. But we have our pricing all worked out for those. So it's not as though, you know, we need to go do higher math to provide a quote for anybody.
Another question, like how often is this happening? Like, how many recoveries are we seeing? Are companies really at risk, and what can you do about it if somebody calls you after they've been infected?
We see many of these frequently in our environment, and in the last within the last month, a $2 billion food industry company, customer of ours in the Midwest, called us on a Friday night. They'd lost everything, and some of the cloud repositories had been deleted. We achieved a complete recovery for them, and literally a week later, a large Texas-based managed service provider with hundreds of employees called us also on a Friday night. They'd lost everything, including the cloud repositories. We recovered for them in a few hours. They were their head of their CTO sent us a message saying that they thought they might all be looking for jobs if it hadn't been for the recovery we were able to manage for them. So it's constantly happening.
There's a question here. Does this solution support object storage?
Yes. And I also see the question about Sure Backup. Sure Backup is a Veeam local feature, but we do quarterly testing, which is and we'll boot up those machines for our customers quarterly, with which essentially accomplishes the same thing as a Sure Backup test does. And can Brian, you could probably dive further into that question.
Yeah. So basically, Sure Backup is the Veeam feature that you can do locally. And I don't know, let's see who, Tyler. I don't know if you've tried to do that, but it is very resource intensive on the local side. So not a lot of people do that because you actually have to have the horsepower to support that Sure Backup sandbox. But like Will said, we will do an automated quarterly test, which is basically a ping test, bottleneck testing, and so forth.
Heartbeat.
On the cloud side.
Yep.
And then we do an annual DR test at zero cost to the customer.
With a full run through, boot up the machines in the boot order, log in,
network,
run applications, whatever you need.
Yep.
Okay, this is probably a question more for Jason, but I know that we get calls in oftentimes after somebody's had an attack and they want to prevent it in the future. Jason, are you seeing an increase in re-attacks for companies that have already experienced ransomware?
Yes, this is a common question. I hate to use this analogy, but this is the one that comes to mind. I think it's pretty relevant. Is that people often think about, hey, I get into a car accident maybe once every 15 years, and it's because they see insurance statistics. You're a good, safe driver. The likelihood is if you keep distance from the next car and all those types of things, you might get into a car accident once every 10 years, 15 years. The problem with cybersecurity is the mentality's got to change there. This is very much a logical situation. And once they have data on your environment, what's the makeup of your environment? You haven't changed your IP addresses in the last 3, 5, 10 years. You're using the same products today. Your security posture hasn't changed from the first attack to the second attack. So the re-attack typically is within maybe 3 to 6 months. Sometimes it's not even from the same criminal. They've sold your information to another criminal. And then that criminal kind of starts staking out your environment, and they realize that you haven't changed your security posture from the first time the first criminal hit you. So the second time around is pretty, we have seen it a lot. We've gotten the call that says, hey, my environment's been hit a second time. We even seen it about 3 months ago where the environment was hit for a second time within 3 weeks of the first attack. And you know, the poor IT team was still recovering mentally, emotionally from restores and everything, and working all nighters, and they got hit again. So it's there. The thing that I would really emphasize is your data backups in DR is extremely important. But the fact is that we need to have a security mentality up front, because what we see is from the ransomware or the attack perspective is that they're going to leak and steal your data before they ransom it and before they delete your backups. All of this is in the name that they can try and secure the fact that you will pay. So if you think for a moment from a criminal's perspective, if I've got your data and I've deleted your data, the likelihood that you're going to pay me goes up. But like I showed you there in the Michigan State University example, is Michigan State said, hey, we're not going to pay. The criminals leaked the information, and Michigan State University still had to restore their environment. So I just want people to know that this is happening. The criminals are going to look at every way that they possibly can to try and get you to pay.
Yeah.
I'm out of questions. Does anybody else have any? Okay. Well, I think that's a wrap. If anybody has questions afterwards, feel free to email any of us. We'd be happy to answer. And we just thank you so much for joining us. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone.